back up here in front of you guys again, and it's been a very, very good process. It's been a fun process. We got a lot of work done. Everybody's been working extremely hard. Have gotten a lot of support, especially from the very, very top. Sheila and the Ford family have been nothing but supportive. You know, Rod Wood has been excellent resource. Dan, you know, can't say enough about what he's done within our process, and the rest of the coaching staff have all been phenomenal in preparation for the process. Chris Spillman has been an amazing asset and resources in the preparation period, and Mike Disner has been very, very helpful as well. Just can't say enough about our personnel department, everything that they've added, all the value that they brought. Ray Agnew, you know, coming on from when I was, you know, when we were both together in LA. He's just been an extraordinary resource and asset. He's brought tremendous value to our process, helping me get everybody up to speed. You know, all the scouts have been amazing. They've done a heck of a job providing the right information, providing very accurate, detailed information, and just being very, very collaborative. You know, John Dorsey's been excellent with his experience that he's brought to the table. You know, and I can go on and on. You know, Lance Newmark has been outstanding. You know, all the experience that he has, Dave Sears, everybody. So it's been a very collaborative effort. I'd even go down to, you know, I think back, you know, for the scouting assistants in terms of what they've done. You know, there's been meetings that have gone on. There's been some long Saturdays where we've just grinded all day. And so what they've done from an operational standpoint in the meetings have been outstanding. You know, Dakota and Ademi and Jordan, all those guys, you know, I just can't tip my hat off to them nearly enough. The analytics department, you know, has been awesome. So I couldn't be more thrilled about the process, where we're at right now, and I feel like we're in great shape right now.
All right, guys, we're going to get to everyone's questions. If you can keep it to 1 to 2 each, we'll start with Tim.
Hey, Brad, good to see you again.
What's up, Tim?
You know, you talked about it being a fun process, but obviously it's been a very different pre-draft process, you know, starting with the cancellation of the combine. I'm just curious, what have you found particularly difficult about the process this year, if anything? And conversely, was there anything that you found to be advantageous about the way it was done this year that maybe you'd like to see moving forward?
You know, I would say, I'll start with the advantageous part first, because I've always been a proponent of, you know, you know, my old GM with the Rams, Les Snead, used to say it all the time, but often the answers are on the film, and you know, not having a portion of the workout process, and you do have to rely on your film evaluations even more. So I do think that that's been actually an advantageous part of the process, and that's just the scout in me. It's just, you know, let's just take football players. But I will say I would say a difficulty that it poses is the amount of exposure that you can get on the players in a live setting, as opposed to not being able to have, you know, all the scouts and the coaches and the staff, you know, see the players up close at the combine. And we had to be pretty strategic in terms of pro day workouts, in terms of, you know, who was going to attend which workout, because there were obviously restrictions because of the protocols that we all had to follow. So that was the one part that, you know, was probably a little bit more difficult, which, you know, it'd be good to hopefully next year that it can get back to, we can get more eyes on the players live and up close. But we used all the resources that we had, and we're able to make the most of it.
Thanks, Brad.
John Macron.
Hey, Brad, good afternoon.
Hey, John, how you doing?
I'm doing excellent. I'm very, very curious. Obviously, one of the talking points and things that people are most curious about is whether or not the Lions are going to stay at 7 or potentially move down. I'm curious. My first question is, what has been your assessment of the value of the number 7 pick, and have you had preliminary conversations about moving down?
Well, I will say the value is, you know, it's of extreme value, I would say. Just, and even whenever you're picking in the top 10, obviously it's extremely valued pick, but it's very exciting to be looking at this crop of players that would be worthy of selecting. Obviously, where I just came from, wasn't really used to picking in the first round that much. So being up in the top 10, but at 7, we do have a cluster of players that we're comfortable with picking, but at the same time, we will be very prepared and, also willing to move, in either direction. But, so we're still open in those regards, but there are a cluster of players that we'd be comfortable with.
Yeah, then just to quickly clarify, have you had talks with other teams regarding trading down at this point?
Yeah, there has been discussions with other teams. I will keep those in-house, but yeah, I mean, there has been discussions.
Okay, and then my final question, after free agency, after looking at both sides of the football, with the pieces that you've added, which side of the ball, offensively, defensively, do you feel like the team needs to address most going into 2021?
I still think that depth on both sides of the ball is of utmost importance. And I know that's probably can take that as a fence answer, but I'm just can't be more authentic with that. Is that I look at both sides of the ball and I'm like, I just don't think there's never enough depth in just certain spots that you can feel. So I don't want to. I know you'd probably like for me to say, we need more defense or more offense, but just looking at our depth chart every day, I do see that there are some areas to address on both sides for sure.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mike O'Hara.
Yeah, Brad, you just talked about this a little bit, but with all the options you have at number 7, how confident are you that you're really in a good position to come out of this draft with really substantial help for your team?
Yeah, I mean, the players that we would be comfortable with, we all feel like they're players that are worthy of a selection. And more so, it's not even, how worthy they are, but it's really if they're the right players for the Detroit Lions. It's not as, we need an offensive guy, we'd like to have a defensive guy, or this position. It's just there's a cluster of multiple positions that we would be comfortable with, but the number one thing is that, is it the right fit for the Detroit Lions? Do they meet the standards, what we're looking for from an intangible standpoint? So make sure that they meet those standards, but I do feel comfortable that, that they all can bring tremendous value.
All right, great. Thank you.
Go to Eric Woodyard.
Hey, what's up, Brad? How you doing? I'm Eric Woodyard, man. I'm just announced today I'm taking over for ESPN as the beat writer for the Lions. So.
Congratulations, Eric.
Thank you, man. Look forward to working with you, man.
Looking forward to it, too. Nice meeting you, man.
Thank you, man. Thank you. So you talked about, obviously, talking to other teams, and if you guys do decide to keep the pick, do you see any pressure in getting the right spot? Is there pressure? I mean, when you have a top 10, take me through that, the type of pressure from your position of holding the pick to that high level when you haven't been in this role, obviously, a lot before.
Yeah, no, that's a very valid question. I think the preparation process leading up to this point does alleviate a lot of that pressure. So, a lot of the decisions are already made well before draft day. So I do think, the process that's been in place, and we started from the very beginning, I felt very prepared before I got into this role in terms of the college draft scope. And so then going through all of March and then going through the process, and then obviously this entire and even in February we had our first. So you talk about all the meetings in February, all of them in March, all of them in April, and then the collaborative effort where it wasn't just the preparation, the process with just scouts, but it's the scouts and the coaches. So with all the process and all the extra looks and all the research that we've done, it does alleviate a lot of the pressure, and it just goes back to, you can just surrender the results to the process. And so that's what we feel strongly about right now.
One more quick one. Do you look at, I mean, obviously it wasn't you guys beforehand, but do you look at former draft picks within the organization and do any research within how, maybe people have picked within the past? Is that a case at all? Or you just kind of going into it with your own mindset totally?
Yeah, are you meaning former draft picks that we have that are on our current roster?
Yeah, or just period within the organization. Do you study like, former picks or anything like that within the franchise?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Very, very mindful of the former picks that we've had at all positions. Starting with wide receiver. I mean, I know that there's been a history of wide receivers that have been selected fairly high. So you do take a look at that. At tight end. We have a high pick as a tight end right now. So yeah, you definitely look at all those options.
Thanks, Brad. Good luck, man.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Dave Burkett.
Hey, Brad. Well, this wasn't on my list to ask, but since you just led into this, I guess that history of wide receivers and tight ends, does that dissuade you from taking those positions then, given the negative history, I guess, surrounding some of those picks?
No, not at all. And I wouldn't even saying that as even in a negative sense of past picks. I was just saying that there has been past picks that have been high picks at that position, but no, it does not. I mean, I think you got to approach every single player in its own silo, and then the same thing with every single position. So if it's a a corner that we really, really like, that's just the corner that we really, really like and think is a great fit. It's not to compare him to Jeff Okudah, or it's not to do anything like that. If there's any other position that we're really, really high on, it's just that we're really excited to have part of our franchise. We don't kind of look at and say, well, we already have this player and how this player has had success or not have had success. So we take it all case by case. But I think that's good drafting to make sure that the players can kind of paint their own picture.
That's fair. Just wanted to be clear on that. This is obviously your first time in the big chair. So what's the most important thing you learned from Les or Charlie or any of the GMs that you've worked for, the best piece of advice that they've, given you, I guess, about sitting here and making this pick?
Yeah, well, I will say, and I probably alluded to probably the main one from Les is just that, you definitely surrender the results to the process. And, just through all the hard work and having a very thorough, diligent process and being about as thorough as you can be. And it's, it can maybe feel exhaustive, but the importance of it, kind of alleviates that a little bit. But I would definitely say Les has always kind of taught me in terms of surrendering the results to the process. And, and I will say on top of that, just make sure that when you're looking at the player, especially when you get to this close, it's always an all things considered approach to it. So those are the things. And, even going back to Charlie Army, it's just I still think of, when I'm talking to our younger scouts about, the evaluation process. I always think about, the core things, what he taught me in terms of, athletic ability, competitiveness, instincts, getting those critical factors right. And then it kind of gives you a little bit of a baseline. So, I definitely still think about all those, and I don't think that they'll ever leave me.
You led into the second question I wanted to ask you, and that's, I guess, what is your appetite for risk early in round one? As in, like, there's some very high ceiling prospects in the draft, but how important is it to get that pick right? Just be like a foundation piece for the future versus hitting a home run, knocking it out of the park first pitch.
Yeah, well, you always want to hit a home run, but I will say, when you talk about risk on the first pick, I always kind of go back to when you're turning that pick in, you don't want to feel nervous. And so, and I know you asked me about previous GMs, so I'll even give the credit to Billy Devaney on that one. Is that's one that he used to always bring up, is that, you want to be confident and you want to feel really, really good when you make that selection, not a nervousness of, I hope this works, so, and I'm not saying that all selections don't have any warts, because, everybody's got a hole or something that they can improve on. But at the end of the day, it's, do we have buy-in, and, do we all feel good about the pick?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Justin Rogers.
Hey, Brad. Good to see you again.
Hey, Justin. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well. You said that there's a group of prospects you're really comfortable with here at that 7 spot. you hear other GMs come to the podium and mention, you know, we've got X number of players with a first round grade. I'm wondering, is there a floor on how far you'd be willing to move back in a given scenario?
No, I wouldn't say that there's a floor. I think that probably would be pigeonholing yourself, or you know, even I'm very very leery of anchors, I would say. So I try to avoid as many anchors as possible. You know, so you always want to kind of go into it through having a sound process of doing all the work and kind of knowing, okay, well, if you did slide back here, then you're looking at this subset of players potentially. And so how do we feel about these players? If you moved up, might be looking at this player, you stayed. So, you know, I think that just goes back to the preparation period and not having to anchor yourself with a certain floor there.
And you've talked about just what you gleaned from your years working with Les. I'm curious, as you're in this new era, in this collaborative era with Dan Campbell, has he brought anything to the table from maybe his experience in New Orleans that has challenged you or changed the way you view the pre-draft process?
Well, you know, I will say this, you know, Dan has made me better in a lot of different areas. That, you know, he's just that kind of unique individual. But I will say, just from a process standpoint, you know, highly respected just his involvement of, you know, of, let's just say, I remember I brought up like a Saturday meeting where we're just grinding all day on a Saturday, and he has so much other stuff on his plate where his willingness of just wanting to actually be down there in the bunker grinding tape with the entire group, and just his insight that he's brought, and he has shared things that they used to do in New Orleans that have been some good ideas, you know, that we have incorporated. So you know, I always talk about there's certain, you know, kind of DNA from different people, you know, different places. So if you get that good DNA, you know, that can kind of help out in the process. You know, you never want to really turn that down.
Thank you, Brad.
Kyle, Mikey.
Hey, Brad. Good to see you.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing well. I got a non-draft question for you.
Mm-hmm.
You guys have created a few new positions since you took over. One that's pretty recent here is a science director. Could you just explain what that position is and what you're hoping to get out of Joe within the operation?
Yeah, so in terms of, you know, with the sports side, and I believe that Mike Clark would be the more appropriate person to answer that question. But you know, Jill has been great, you know, since day one, since even throughout the interview process when I had first met her. So it is more of a question for Mike Clark, but I do think that the element of sports science, you know, in terms of athletic performance is extremely important. So we're happy to have Jill aboard.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
John Neo.
Brad, I'm just wondering, we've heard a lot about collaboration, obviously, and I'm wondering, how exactly do you go about building consensus on a prospect? I mean, especially if you've got, you know, scouts on one side, maybe coaches on the other. And is it a little bit harder in year one? You haven't been around these guys for 6, 8, 10 years like you were in LA and some of those draft meetings.
Yeah, no, that is a good question. I wouldn't say it's hard because I do respect the difference of opinions. You know, and ultimately, you know, it's going to be, you know, my decision to actually make the right choice and kind of put the right value on the player. But I would not be able to put the right value on the player without everybody's input and everybody's collaboration. And, you know, I always say, like, the beauty of scouting is, you know, that you can have 10 people, you know, in a dark room looking at the same exact film, and you get 10 different pieces of opinion. I mean, that's just the artistic beauty of scouting. So, you know, whenever I hear, you know, all these different varying opinions, I actually get intrigued. And what it does is it actually ignites you and actually motivates you to dig even deeper, because, you know, if it's all, you know, everybody's the same, well, you want to say like, oh, well, that seems easy because everybody thinks the same about the player. But, you know, but often when it is the same, then you also got to think about, okay, is there something that we don't know? or is there something that we did not take into consideration? So, but it is a good question, but I don't think it really posed a challenge. It actually kind of is more motivating and encouraging.
Just to follow up though, when you mentioned it, it's ultimately it's your choice in the end as the GM. Have you gotten advice along those lines from whether it's Les or, John Dorsey in the room with you talking about, trusting your instincts, your gut with that final call, I guess?
Yeah. And I mean, that's what ultimately that's what it comes down to at the end of the day is what is in your gut, but what is in your gut, it does come from all of the input, not only just your own, I guess you could call it your own inside view, as what you would call it, but making sure that you've already kind of gathered everything from the outside view, and then once you've gathered all of that information, then you can kind of revert back to your inside view and then make the right decision. You feel good about it.
Chris Burke.
Hey Brad, hope you're doing well.
Hey Chris,
have you gotten an invite to the Rams beach house for the draft yet?
I'll tell you what. Great story. I was actually was on the phone with Les just the other day, and actually had to put him on FaceTime because we had snow coming down here in Detroit. So I had to let him know, it was like, that beach house looks really great, but this is our draft setup, and I kind of put the phone out to the window so he could see all the snow falling, and he was just laughing at me, but it looks like a cool setup, and I hope those guys, get everything that they need out of that setup.
And then you mentioned you want to draft football players. You don't want to pay too much attention to the 40 times or the pro day, things like that. I guess I'm just curious how long it takes you to be comfortable with a player in that regard. Like how you study a guy to get to the point where you can say, all right, he's a football player. This is what we want. Without the numbers, this is the type of player we want. How do you get there? How long does that process take?
Yeah, that's a good question, because and it probably goes back to a little bit of, not having the combine, is that you actually kind of feel that into your gut probably fairly early in the process, as you're watching a player. It's like, this dude's a football player. And so now that when you talk about the workout numbers and all of that, well, the process, and there was workouts that were going on in April, that you didn't, and we were already in meetings, kind of trying to finalize, opinions on these players, and you really did have to go off of, what your evaluation was. You didn't have the, luxury. Well, now I don't even want to call it the luxury, but that external information of, you thought the guy was fast, and then, he didn't run the time, and then now you start questioning your speed and all. Like, we didn't have to go through that this year. So actually, I thought that was the beauty of it. But going back to your original question, I do think you can figure out if the guy's a football player fairly early in the process, and it kind of goes back to those critical factor traits I was speaking with that Charlie taught me a long time ago.
Thank you.
Tony?
Yeah, a couple of things. Brad, how you doing?
Good. How you doing, Tony?
I'm doing good. First of all, how difficult was it, or was it at all, to evaluate, Parsons, Chase, Sewell, the guys who opted out? Did that make it more challenge for you guys?
It wasn't a challenge. It's just, you just knew that you had to deal with the hand that you were dealt, and you just had to just go back to the tape, of the last time that they had played. Now, you probably have watched a lot of those games multiple times in different settings, but you even have to go back further than that. And then it kind of makes you actually lean onto your sources at those schools, that you really, really trust, and rely on that information, and making sure that, I always talk about the scouts are the experts, on all these players. All of our area scouts and national scouts and directors, like they know these players better than anybody else. They watch more film than anybody else, within the building. So relying on them and relying on the experts, and then just really relying on the film that's available to you.
And on trading down or even trading up, and the whole process, we're not in the war room. We have no idea how it works. When you go into the draft, you already have your mind made up, or the teams know if X player is there, that trade's going to happen. And then if it doesn't, something else happens, or the trades just spur of the moment, you know what's going to happen, 15 minutes, half hour before, or do you go in like Thursday, if certain team, if the player's there, certain team's going to call you and you're having a deal complete?
Yeah, you have well, for other teams, I can't, speak for other teams, but you do have, maybe an idea of, possibly if a certain player, gets to a certain pick, then, if that team may have a need, that they have, then they might, want to move up. And that's just knowing the whole scope of the draft, and also having a, incredible pro department. And I will say, just from a team needs standpoint, with, Rob Lohman and Joe and Chuck and Ray, they've done an outstanding job, from the team needs standpoint. But you have an idea, but then, when you're speaking just from, our own franchise, usually if you're going to kind of make that move, especially trading up, usually there's a player in mind that you want to make sure that you can get, that you targeted.
So is it prearranged with a particular team before the draft, before, if this, then this?
It has been in the past. It has been, and it has been, you don't know until you're on the clock,
Right.
So, I mean, I've seen it both ways.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Go to Corey Woods.
Hey, Brad, you talked about finding guys that are going to be the right fit for the Lions. Now, are you talking about more from a schematic standpoint, or more somebody that's going to fit the new culture?
Yeah, that's a great question. More so from a culture fit, regardless of scheme, and obviously scheme does play a part, but at the end of the day, if the player has a certain standards of toughness, passion, if a player has grit, that doesn't have to do anything with if a guy's a press corner, or an off zone quarters corner, or if a guy's a 34 rush back. Does the guy play hard or he does not? Does he have a high motor or does he? Does he take plays off? Does he not? Does he love football? Does he not? So those are the standards that we look for, but having that great passion for football that's at an elite level, those are pretty much the standards that are the fits, more so of if the guy's just a scheme fit.
If I can follow up with another one, how much of influence will John Dorsey have on your decisions? Will you guys be lockstep, or are you just going to go ahead and have the final say just by yourself?
Yeah, well, John Dorsey has played an equal part in the process, just like everyone else has been in the process, and especially from a collaborative approach. So, can't say that, just as John Dorsey has, a big effect on how decisions are made, everybody else does, because everybody's has played an equal part in terms of the decision making and what they've brought to in terms of the process.
Got time for three more, starting with Larry Lage.
Good afternoon, Brad.
How you doing?
I'm well. How many people will be in the draft room and the physical space that you're in on draft night, and how does that compare numbers-wise, perhaps to pre-pandemic years with the Rams?
Yeah, that's a great question. I say that because I remember I've been in the draft rooms in kind of both fashions. I've been in the draft rooms where it was a packed house in there, and I've been in the draft room where it was kind of more thinned out, and that was pre-pandemic, where it was just less people in the room. And I think that there's pluses and minuses to both. When there's more people in the room, you might have, a little bit quicker access. If you need more intel, you need to ask some questions. Like quicker access, it might make the process a little bit more efficient. But I've also seen it the other side, where you maybe be able to manage some things a little bit better, when it's more of a thinned out room. But we will have no more than 10 people in our draft room.
Bojo.
Hey there, Brad. How are you?
Good. How you doing?
Good, thank you. In the absence of an obvious pick at number 7, although you might disagree with that, maybe you think there is an obvious pick at number 7, but in the absence of that, certainly seems like trading down is the preferred option, at least of the fans and media. How do you let that be known? Like, how do you put a for sale sign on your 7th pick and let people know I am open to all offers, if in fact you are open to all offers? How do you do that?
Well, a lot of it is, you have dialogue with, other teams. You have dialogue with other, GMs, in terms of, what your willingness is, to move, ahead or back in within the draft. So, I guess that's probably, and even talking to you guys now, like, I'm not sure if that actually plants the for sale sign on it, but, just saying that although that we do have a cluster of players that we'd be comfortable with, we are still willing and open to move in either direction.
And just a quick follow-up. Isn't it incumbent that you have to convince him that you possibly might take a quarterback at number 7?
I wouldn't say that I would have to convince anybody of that.
Because quarterback is usually the position that people jump up for, obviously. So I wondered if that would be the lure.
Yeah, I mean, I can see where that could be a case, but, I would say that, again, talking about the anchors of that, I wouldn't say that that's the end all be all in terms of what it has to be. There might be another player that, a team may covet that's not a quarterback, so, but I can't really speak for the other teams.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Carlos, last question.
Yeah, Brad, how do you define a blue chip player in the draft, and how many do you believe are in this draft?
Well, first of all, to define it, I will say it's probably, you want to think that it is a sound investment. I would say, in terms of if he's a blue chip player, and you really don't have any doubts. And like what I was talking about earlier, in terms of your confidence that you have in the selection of the player, obviously there's not, you don't have a whole draft of blue chip players, but there is a handful of blue chip players that are in this draft.
Is that a handful? Is that 5, 6, 7, somewhere around there?
I thought I said handfuls, not handful.
Handfuls.
Yeah. Could be 2 handfuls, could be 3, but no. There is a, obviously it's not the whole entire draft, probably not even the whole first round, that you would kind of put that blue chip. And I'm not really exactly sure what everything that goes into what your description of blue chip is, but I think I got an idea. But I guess you're talking about just the very elite players within this draft. But if that's along the lines of blue chip, I would say that there's a good cluster of them, I would say.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week. Have a good weekend.
Thanks, Brad. Thanks, Eamon.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Brad.